Self-development, how much did you invest in self-development?
I invest a ton into myself, and I'm a product of that. You can only learn so much through experience. You can only learn so much from a few pieces of wisdom here and there. When you devour a book, you're getting a decade or more of somebody else's life work and best experience. We can't become who we're meant to be unless we are transforming who we are, and that takes some outside content.
Hi, baby, hop in the Lamborghini. I'm meaty, on me only, I'm meaty. Hi, baby, hop in the Lamborghini. Left for a minute, I do not sweat it. Look at the cash I'm spinning. There it goes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stroke of Success podcast. I'm your host, KB here. Today's guest is special. I saw him for the first time last year at the Vault. For those who don't know what the Vault is a conference, a 3-day conference in South Florida. It's hosted with my mentor, my hero, as most of the people that know me know really well, Patrick Bet-David, who I talk about all the time. And Peter was on stage last year. And I just heard his story. And this year, about a month ago, I was fortunate enough to run into him after lunch. And I'm like, boom, let me talk to him, jump in, introduce myself. And I said, hey, Peter, would you mind jumping on my podcast? But his story is amazing. So with that being said, today, let's welcome our guest, Peter Swenson. Peter, thank you for jumping on today, man.
Good to be on, KB.
Thank you for jumping on. I know it's a last minute thing, back and forth, we're planning stuff. Peter, start with where are you from?
Originally, so I live in Arizona now, but I'm originally from a very small town in Minnesota called Staples. So a town of 2,000 people. I grew up across the street from cows on a dirt road, 6 miles out of town, and the town was a blip on the map. So wow. It was, I always say, it's a great place to be from. It's a great place for many to stay, but for me, adventure was in my future. So
big family?
I think it depends on what you're measuring against, but four siblings total. So myself, my brother, who I have worked with and still work with, and is trying to reach me on a walkie-talkie. We are testing some walkie-talkies. It's like an old school pager system.
That's awesome.
So that was him right on cue. So we still work together. We founded our company together, and then 2 sisters, and then my parents, who are still together, live in Minnesota.
So you said rural? It was a very rural place you were living in?
Really rural, yeah. So we were 6 miles outside of a 2,000 person town. So we were rural from the rural, and on a dirt road. It's still a dirt road today. One neighbor that you could see and nobody else in eyesight. So it was beautiful.
Isn't life more simpler in many ways?
Every time I go back to rural Minnesota, it is a more slow experience, which is beautiful. I mean, I don't dislike it, although I am kind of unnerved by the slow pace compared to a big city.
So I'll tell you something. I am from Brooklyn, New York. Complete opposites. New York City, 1-bedroom apartment building, 5 people living in there, hustle bustle. And I used to daydream. I tell my mom, single mom raised me. I was telling her, like, I would love to live in the Midwest, lifestyle like yours. It's interesting how perspective changes when you get older.
Yeah.
So cool. So your dad was an entrepreneur?
He was a police officer. So he was a deputy sheriff in the small county that we were living in. And then my mom ran a daycare from our house. So I like to describe it as very, very blue collar upbringing, fantastic, family values, and a blessing to grow up in that environment.
So she was an entrepreneur in some sense, right? Entrepreneurial?
Yeah, I would say lightly. I mean, definitely she ran her own business. I never saw, it wasn't until I was really in my adult years that I recognized it as running her own business, like in a more real sense. For me, it was always growing up was just, does daycare in the house. And it wasn't, certainly not a very profitable business, but a business of passion for her, and always made enough to make our world go around.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you guys were comfortable.
Yeah, we were comfortable. I mean, growing up, I grew up on thrift store clothing a lot, and Walmart clothing, like Kmart was a thing back then. So, but I had fairly humble beginnings, but never a question of like food, or we did vacations and camping and stuff, but it wasn't, not a lot of new things were purchased.
Frugal.
Yeah.
Money work.
Yeah.
How did that shape your mindset, your psyche growing up?
I think one of the greatest gifts that I had from that beginning is going to be, I was raised a very open level of communication in the home. There was a lot of authenticity from my mom, my dad, our situation, the town I came from. I didn't, I was picked on a little bit, bullied just a little bit in middle school. And so I had that little flavoring to my upbringing as well. But in general, I always felt and knew and wanted something more adventurous. So I never imagined myself sticking around that area long term. But when I describe to people that it's a good place to be from, I think it's because like the family values, the not being in the hustle bustle of everything, and then discovering, such a deep appreciation for the ability to just play in the woods or on the dirt road. And it's simple. And there's a lot of beauty and simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Plus, I think for family values, I have to agree with you. I can only imagine how connected you guys were, right? Dinner table, local church, community,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like the quintessential Lutheran church upbringing. And my dad worked evenings a lot. So he was maybe 50% of the time there for dinner and not, but it was, we were close.
That's awesome.
And although my sisters, we're not as close with them, proximity wise, they're in Minnesota and Seattle. My brother and I have worked together and been, best friends for nearly our entire lives.
That's amazing. You don't hear about that as much. Actually, what you do, Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate.
I'll take it.
Tristan, the Paul brothers, Logan Paul and these brothers are both very, very close. Tell me about did you ever had an entrepreneur bug, Peter, that you had inside of you? Like, wait a minute, I'm itching. I don't want to. What aspiration did you have in high school?
Yeah. So those are different questions. Sort of different questions, but I'll tie them together. So please. I spent a majority of my professional career and the solar company that my brother and I own now, we still do a lot of prospecting door to door. So I've spent a majority of my professional career in and around door to door sales, which is more common now than it was 15 or 20 years ago when I was getting into it. But that's where, I've done tons and tons of my professional work in sales, in homes, on doors, recruiting, leading, building teams, building a company. The first time I ever knocked on doors or sold something for commission was in high school. So that I would say there was a seed there. I was working at a hospital, 15 years old, getting paid, I think at that time, like $6.25 an hour, how times have changed. And I did math because there was a frozen pizza and frozen food fundraiser. And I started doing math on how much I could earn if I sold this frozen food to my neighbors versus how much I earned at the hospital. And I discovered that it was more valuable, like 3 or 4 times more valuable to go, talk to neighbors and get them to buy frozen food than it was to work at the hospital. So I did that and made enough money to go to Europe with the class trip. So that was really the beginning of my entrepreneurial experience, maybe a little bit of Boy Scout popcorn before that. But it wasn't until, I didn't officially launch a company until 3 years ago, and I'm 39. So for a very long time, I was a straight commission 1099 contractor and sales leader, which is certainly entrepreneurial in nature, but still a little bit sheltered from the full-fledged risk of launching and running a company.
I'm taking notes here, but I love taking notes later for myself and my audience. So insane. You bought the company, started the company 3 years ago.
Yeah.
At age 36.
36, yeah. Okay.
You sold frozen pizza to neighborhood, right? At what age?
Let's call 15. It was 15. I couldn't drive. My mom still had to drive me around for it. So 15. It would have been before 16, yeah.
Okay, 15. Wow. That's the hustle mentality.
Yeah. And then I've knocked 85,000, it's a little north of 85,000 doors in the field. So I've done tons of door knocking. I don't have time to do that anymore, but it's still a thrill. So it's one of those activities that, only the crazy people enjoy it, but a lot of people embrace it because of the opportunity it can create for yourself, the value you can create for your customers. But I don't think I've met a person whose ego actually enjoys the judgment from a stranger on the doorstep. That just doesn't exist.
I did it. I'm a real estate agent by trade. My day job. I did it. I don't enjoy it. I know it works though.
Mm-hmm.
Belly to belly, ear to ear, phone call, or it's the top, one of the top ways to do it. However, does it work for everyone? In my opinion, I've been doing sales for 20 years. I don't think so.
Correct.
But if you have the discipline, the drive, and you see the value in it, I think one can thrive. Case in point, yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the industry it's massive right now, not just in solar, but in pest control, home security,
roofing,
satellite roofing. I mean, there's all, and then you get the, every now and then you still get the magazine sales crews that are oftentimes not you don't always get what you pay for in those, but
100%. Okay. So 15 sold pizza. That was the beginning. All right. Let's go. Did you go to college?
Yeah. Went to college. So I went to a small school in Minnesota called St. John's University, small Catholic school in the middle of the woods. And, for me, it was still big. My hometown was 2,000 or a little north of 2,000, and the college was 2,000. So even though that is tiny for colleges, it was a little D3 school. It was still big for me. And then my wife, who I ultimately married, she went to the all girls college a couple miles up the road, and those schools combined classes. So it was two small colleges that kind of shared resources. And
that's amazing.
Funny story, right? Sales and sales is in all of our blood, right? I don't think communication and influence is sales. If you got a wife, a child, a business, an employer, a stranger on the street, everything that we do in life is selling an idea or a concept, or we're being sold an idea and a concept. But one of my fun examples of that is the day I met my wife is when my roommate introduced me to her as his girlfriend, because they were dating. So we'd hung out that night as a group of us. And when he and I were walking home, I said, Brad, just so you know, when you guys break up, I'm going to date her. He laughed it off. And I was not a playboy by any means, but I said, I'm serious. When you guys break up, I'm going to date her.
You said that to him.
And that wasn't the hard, and he kind of waved it off. He was not super serious about the girls that he dated, generally speaking. So I knew that we'd get there. But I would say that wasn't even the biggest sale. The biggest sale was to her roommates after they broke up, that now she could date the roommate of her ex and that whole thing. But yeah, sales is, we're always engaged in some form of communication and enrollment and selling.
It's so funny you're saying this. I thought this was my theory. I caught on to it 5 years ago. I did a LinkedIn article about this, how you sell everyone, your parents, everything. I'm like, dude, I'm the only one who thinks like this. You're the 20th person who said the same thing. I agree with you, man. I was talking to someone the other day, my daughter. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I'm like, she's an entrepreneur. And she's like, what difference of the entrepreneur and this? I go, listen, you're going to sell something.
Mm-hmm.
You sell me all the time to buy you toys or clothes or this and that. And I try to sell you I'm not going to buy you anything. And so I'm planting the seed in her mind, but you're 100% right, man. Your wife's selling you, right? She's selling you about, let's take a vacation, honey. Let's go over here. Let's do this. Let's buy a house, sell a house. So we're all selling, right? And I want to touch on something. So door knocking. Have you done phone sales too?
A little bit of phone sales. So there was when I was in college is when I started knocking on doors, and I worked with the oldest direct sales company in America. It's called the Southwestern Company. It's based in Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah. It was founded 170-ish years ago after the Civil War. So it was, at that point, that was the southwestern corner of America, just north of United States. And so I sold books door to door with that company for 4 years. That's where I got my start. And the culture and the experience knocking on doors, what I discovered I loved about it is that it's a furnace to chisel yourself inside of. So if we use it, use the metaphor of a forge, right? Knocking on doors, and that is the furnace, that is the forge in which fantastically sharp and effective weapons can be created. And just because you stick the metal into the forge or the furnace doesn't mean you get a sharp blade when you pull it out. You still got to do a lot of work. You've got a hammer. And but I went into that furnace a lot in college, after college, out of college. You know, it's been a big part of my professional career, and it's a part of the business that I get super engaged in. Is you can, through that experience, discover a tremendous amount about yourself, about your versatility, about your persistence, about your stick-to-itiveness. You learn very quickly what works with communication or not, how to handle objections or not. And so the feedback loop is so fast and door to door that I've always loved it. Phone sales, you were asking about that. Very briefly, there was a moment like a year and a half when I did some inside sales call center stuff, and we have an inside sales team here, but I'm limited in exposure. I just know oftentimes the biggest difference, I would say, is, you know, you can smile and dial with a room full of people, culture and music pumping, and when you get, you know, crapped on the phone call and it's done, you have this environment that you can now bounce back inside of.
100%.
When you get crapped on the doorstep and it slams in front of you, or they tell you they're going to call the cops, or the neighbors like looking at you weird, and like you're in their world, they're not in yours. And so it's it does take a different type of perseverance when you're in the field than when you're on the phone.
That's insane, man. Let's go back a second. So St. John's University in the Wood, got it, sold pizza. Okay. Your first sales job was with that company you talked about right now?
Yeah, Southwestern.
What'd you sell?
They were study guides and kids books, and then some software, CD-ROMs back then. And this is in 2004 and 5 and 6 and 8. It was those summers that I did about 4 months at a time. And this was in the age of the internet is just beginning to become a thing. So it was this weird, we're still selling these books that feel kind of like encyclopedias. They're much more useful than encyclopedias, but a lot of people would just call them that. They were like study guides. And then children's books, which I was attached to because my mom did daycare, and I was a huge believer in that in education, and then the CDs. But the nature of that business, if you ask anybody that works there today, and they still have a couple thousand employees that sell books every summer, and then they've got a group of sister companies. I want to say a dozen, maybe more than that: consulting, investments, insurance, clothing, a lot of different options. But they'll all still tell you, if they knock on doors and sell books or ever did it, that business was not about books or publishing or knocking on doors. That business was about developing people. And that was their mission, is to develop leaders so that leaders could go develop great companies. And both my brother and I I'm very proud of spending time there. He actually spent a lot longer than I did. He was there 11 years, and he's 9 years. And he's number 11 all time. It's a few 100,000 alumni. He's number 11. So he's an absolute wizard at the process and the science and the art of selling, even more than I am. He beat me at every, I may have gotten there first. Sometimes I stayed ahead of him, but year over year, he crushed me.
Dude, I have to interview him.
I'll connect you to him. He's great.
Please, I would love to hear his story too, and then have you guys together and maybe in person next time you're in Florida. Peter, wow. They made this company, of course, they had to make a revenue, but their primary goal was to develop leaders to go do bigger and better things out there. Provide value.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think it worked for such a long time. And ultimately, they developed a group of sister companies so they could keep some of that talent in-house and build more expansive opportunities together, because you're not going to go knock on doors and sell books until you're 42. That doesn't work. And there's not good enough money there. At least there wasn't. It's a little bit better now. And I still have friends that are in that business and love it. And their passion is not the books, and their passion is not even the doors, because everybody's ego hates that. Their passion is the growth, it's the opportunity, and it's the development of the young future leaders that they're working with. And I think a long time ago, it was simply just a good enough proposition to do that and create enough goodwill and enough positive momentum in a college campus or in a community that the funnel just keeps refilling itself. So you get graduates that go off to the career field, and you get friends, family, colleagues, others that come in and refill. And today it's a bit more competitive. And so they've got them in these sister companies, but it's a beautiful business.
What'd you do after that?
After that, I thought I hung up my knocking shoes twice in my career. After my third summer selling books, I thought I was done. And after my fourth summer selling books, I swore I was done. And then a year and a half later, after I moved down to Arizona, I stumbled back into door-to-door the startup companies that I had been a part of, a couple times as an employee and once as a very young, naive founder. Like, I don't even really, I guess that's when we started our first business, but we barely brought in a paycheck. I stumbled back into door-to-door through home security. So one of my friends said, "Hey, I'm knocking on doors again. I'm making good money. You got to come check it out." And I went and followed a sales manager, and what I saw him do in an hour, I'm like, "Oh, you just made $600? I'm better than you. Like, based on what I've seen, I'm better than you," which that may not have been true. My ego was nice and loud, but I did have a really successful summer. So I joined that company and made over $100,000 in the next 3.5 months. And that's what launched my career in home security, where I stayed for 11 years. So residential home security, I sold it. I built teams, trained teams, worked with probably close to 600-700 people. At the biggest my organization was a little over 150, and saw that, worked my ass off to build and sustain momentum. Learned a lot of lessons in leadership, learned a lot of lessons in management, did a lot of things right, did a lot of things wrong. And in 2016, so it would have been 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. 18, 19, and 20. So we had 5 years of growth, steady growth. And then we had 3 years of decline at the end. And there were two things that were happening. One is, I believe the organization I was with, I was the only sales leader in that company that was really committed to growing and doing the work required to grow. There were a lot of other guys that were kind of coasting. They'd been in the business a decade. They'd made a lot of money. They weren't trying to go and build the entire thing anymore. And so, we lost some momentum in the organization. And then ultimately, home security has become a much more commoditized industry in the last couple of years, with Blink and Arlo cameras and Amazon and Apple's in the game and Samsung's in the game. I mean, it is very easy to set up your own alarm system today. That wasn't the truth 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that is, it's actually one of the big moments that Patrick Bet-David, who you mentioned and how we met. Patrick, I was doing a mastermind with him. So 40 or 50 people jumped onto a call every month. And
what year?
This was
18.
It would have been 2020.
20 before COVID.
Yeah. Right as COVID was rocking. So we thought COVID was going to be the death of door to door, and in some states it was very different in some states.
Yeah.
Northeast, especially.
I've done California, maybe
parts of California. Generally speaking, the rest of America, it was gangbusters for door to door, because humans were so devoid of human contact that if it wasn't if they were afraid of you, they wouldn't answer the door. And if they saw it was a human being to interact with, they would answer the door. And it was like this jolly celebration of life and connection and community. And door to door crushed the summer of, it was incredible results in every industry that I know of, that knocked on doors in 2020. During 2020, though, our business model was being challenged. Right? Amazon, these big companies, tech companies, made a very big play into the home security space, and smart homes specifically. All these smart plugins and things that used to be very novel. And I was talking to Pat on this, 5-6 minute coaching conversation that I'd had with him, and I briefly explained the industry is in trouble. There are a few parachutes, things that we could do, solar, other products that we could look into. I have done my best to bring these to the CEO and the president of the company. I've tried to make a case that something needs to change dramatically, and it doesn't seem like their timeline is nearly as imperative as mine. And Pat said in that moment, he's like, if the writing's on the wall and you're voicing the sound of alarm, assuming you're not wrong, if the leaders in your company aren't going to make that pivot with you, then you have to pivot on your own. And it wasn't specifically to solar. I didn't know that was exactly what I was going to do. But his direct feedback, if you've ever gotten it from him too in a mastermind or anything, it was, I just treated it as the truth. And so far, every time I've done that, it's worked out pretty well. And that's what we did. We investigated thoroughly the solar industry to try to quickly understand, what was it about solar that a lot of my friends had seen? Was it something that we could pivot into? was it viable to pivot into it with our current organization, or do we need to break off? Did I need to start something fresh? And so although we had 40, 50 people still active in the organization, the original move wasn't to simply take everybody and say, hey, we're doing this now. It was, and that might have proven better, hindsight 2020. But what I did is I approached it and said, look, I need to make a decision for myself and my family and my future first. I'll do that along with my brother. Like, if we were starting from scratch and we were committed, we could build something. If that's what it takes, we'll do it. And so first we got to the place where we knew what we wanted to do no matter what, and knew what we were committed to no matter what. And then we aligned around some principles that we had experienced and done a good job of promoting inside of the culture in the home security space. And we also recognized some of the cultural pieces that had slipped in that we didn't want to work with anymore. Just bad habits and some bad relational dynamics that we didn't want to introduce into this new company. And so when we invited our team to join, it was really with that conversation. It is here's who we are, here's what we stand for, here's what this is going to be like. And if you want to join, please come. And if this is what you're looking for, it's not here. It's not going to be here. And we didn't have everybody transition over. We had most of them transition short term. As we continue to stick to our guns about these things, we had a bunch of them transition out very quickly. And that was pretty scary to proactively reduce our sales force while we also went out on the limb of launching a company and had all of the financial implications and considerations about that. But, it proved to be one of the most important decisions we made early on. I mean, very simple concept. Know who you are, know the values of your company, and make every decision with alignment to them, which we have done to the best of our ability for 3 years now.
3 years in solar.
3 years in solar.
So after selling security, Patrick Bet-David's been a catalyst in your life. You would say, right? Would you agree to that?
Absolutely.
And he got you consulting one-on-one masterminds. He got you to think about doing solar, and you got into it. You and your brother. What's your brother's name?
Yeah, Jake
and Peter. And 3 years. Last year, you spoke on stage, and you shared your revenue, your gains, your improvements. Can you share that last year? How percentage-wise?
So this year will actually end up being a slight down year. The industry itself has been kind of rocked with the interest rates that real estate has seen as well. Yeah. But last year we did $48 million in contracted revenue. The year prior to that, it was 36. And then our first year was, well, I guess that was only a few months, but it was like 3 million in the first few months.
So 2020, 3 million. 2021?
Yes, 2021, 36 million, 2022, 48 million. And this year will be 40-ish.
So 48 last year, and this year, which it's 2023. Oh, yeah, 2022.
40-ish is what
okay.
Yeah.
We'll take that. You have a lot of W-2 employees?
Very few.
Very few.
We have a team in the Philippines that are VAs. Yeah, VAs supporting and marketing, project management, and administrative assistants, executive assistants. So we've got a small team there. We've got another dozen, maybe 10 or 11 W-2 here, and then 50 or 60 1099.
Peter, when I heard your thing last year when you speak, I was floored. I mean, like that you've seen numbers you shared with my audience right now. You shared on stage last year. I mean, let's pat on your guys' back. So, how much self-development? Go ahead.
I'll qualify. Not that I have to qualify this, but I'll qualify it. Like in real estate, when you sell a house and it's a $1.2 million home, those numbers stack up pretty quick when you're selling a bunch of those, right? Because they're big projects. Our average customer size is $45,000. So the numbers stack quickly. And when I say them out loud, they sound a lot bigger than they feel. And in solar, you can achieve pretty big benchmarks pretty quick. That being said, I know that what we've done is fairly unique in terms of most of our competition. And there are very low barriers to entry in solar, at least there have been historically. And
that'll change soon. It'll change.
It'll change. Yeah, it's changing right now. There's a lot of regulation that's getting pushed through. a residential solar association that's being formed to help bring some
Governance.
self-improvement, self-regulation, just leveling up the industry so that it doesn't all come from outside, which, in the real estate business is, one of the things. Yeah.
Self-development. How much did you invest in self-development besides Patrick but David? Do you go to other masterminds? You have a coach, life coach, physical?
Yeah, I've got a bunch. So I haven't calculated it recently, well over $500,000 in the last 10 years. I've done a lot of landmark education. So there's a company, Landmark.
They're amazing.
I think is the company. It's amazing. I've
been told to go.
a dozen of their courses, I want to say. And so I did Landmark. That was where I spent a lot of it. I've done a lot of Tony Robbins, Unleash the Power Within a couple times in person, Business Mastery a couple times now.
Okay.
I'm actually going to Date with Destiny in a month and a half. So Tony. I've spent a lot of time and money investing into the valuetainment community, and that's probably where most of my investment at this point has gone in terms of courses and events. But then beyond that, I've done personal coaching. So I've had a personal coach or a business coach for close to 10 years as well. So I've had a few private kind of one-offs. I worked with a Tony Robbins coach. Right now I work with a Southwestern consulting coach. So one of their sister companies is a consulting company. I worked with those guys for a year. I've been now with a Tony Robbins coach for about 2.5 years. And I just added another, I'm doing a trip to Tulum for vision casting and really articulating and defining my 1 year, 3 year, and 10-year outcomes. And I'm doing that right before Date with Destiny. So my next 2 months are going to be crazy. I go to Tulum for 6 days on there's no ayahuasca or drugs, but it's like a very personal kind of vision focused experience. And then right after that, I do Date with Destiny along with my wife. We're gonna do that virtually, but at our property here out in the sticks or in the mountains in Arizona. So needless to say, I invest a ton into myself. I'm a product, and I'm a product of that. I mean, you can only learn so much through experience. You can only learn so much from a few pieces of wisdom here and there. When you devour a book, like you're getting a decade or more of somebody else's life work and best experience. And Pat, I don't read books the way Patrick Bet David does. That guy is like an encyclopedia. I mean, I don't know anybody who reads books that way, but I read a lot. I read 1 or 2, sometimes 3 books a month. And I haven't found myself fantastic at taking notes and rereading, although with traction, I have reread it a few times and I've got notes and stickies in that. Oftentimes I'm listening to it, or I'll speed read pretty quick, and I'm just there to absorb. I believe that it's like your mind's pretty fertile. Plant good seeds everywhere, and the harvest will be good. So because I'm not hyper organized or meticulous in my note taking, I take as much as I can. Listen to podcasts all the time, and God put us here to learn. We can't become who we're meant to be unless we are transforming who we are, and that takes some outside content.
Amazing. Pat, we're almost done, Peter. You got 2 more minutes?
I'm good. Yeah. Thanks for letting me ramble so much.
No, please. I'm enjoying this. Peter, you know what I'm thinking? Would you come to Florida often?
No, I don't. I pretty much only am in Florida for the Vault or the SLS. Yeah.
What I'll do next time, maybe for the Vault, we'll meet up. Or LSS, we'll meet up after. Maybe I could do a face-to-face interview. It's a different energy, different vibe. You know what I mean? Yeah. Question: Law of attraction. You familiar with it?
Yes. Yeah.
You believe in it?
So
the meaning is different for many people.
So I would say the answer is yes, for a bunch of different reasons. So I think like the metaphysical, vibrational energy, power versus force, wavelengths, like I believe all of that. In fact, so much of that is scientifically validated. Like not the most woo-woo versions that we've heard, but if you read Power versus Force, science documented that shit a long time ago.
Okay.
Like decades ago, they documented that. Yogurt in a petri dish will change its electromagnetic frequency based on your emotional, like what you're thinking about. Kinesiology, which everybody hears that word, like kinesiology, muscle testing, it's been done effectively across the world for ages. So I definitely believe that in that vein, law of attraction and vibrational energy and frequency stuff is real. I also have seen in my life, since I reincorporated faith and found my faith, and for me, that's Christianity. I surrendered to Christ 3 years ago. I have never found more serendipity in my life than I have in the last 3 years. And I think when there's a tremendous amount of serendipity, you're at least walking in the same lane as law of attraction.
I agree with you.
And so I think when you're grounded, connected, and in flow state, and you're not fighting upriver against everything, I think you find a lot more of the things that you think you want, because what you want is aligned with what God or the universe intends for you.
100%. Wow, that's amazing. I think you same meaning that I follow. I feel like you can call it God or universe, depending on the person. I do think that there's one thing the book Secret doesn't talk about as much is to put action. You must put the action. Even God, I'm Muslim and believe in Islam, and and by the way, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are very similar. Bible, Torah, Quran, right? We're considered to be cousins in so many ways. They say, but you put the step in. You have faith in God, and then God will deliver. Universe deliver, whatever. But interesting. Last question: your wife, does she work?
Very hard at home with the kids. So we started homeschooling this year.
Okay. Did she have a career before that?
She had a professional career a long time ago. So out of college, she worked for a few years. And then when I got back into door to door, she traveled with me so that we could be close. And then we had our first child almost 10 years ago. And then since then, it's been full-time mom, which is the greatest gift that we could give our kids. And I'm glad I can support Amanda to do it. It fills her more than anything else.
No, note for my audience. I stalked Peter after I came back from the vault, and beautiful family, by the way. I think I saw you on Facebook. I looked you up on Facebook. So God bless you for that, my friend. The reason why I asked you, how supportive is your wife? But because some households, wives have their own career and their own aspirations, and sometimes wives have to kind of give that up for the husband to take over. How's that been for you guys overall?
We see the masculine, feminine dance as I believe would be considered what many would call traditional. I think feminine and masculine energy are different. I think they work differently. I think God intended us to be different and complementary. And Amanda and I we lean into that. And it's not, I'm driven by this mission driven paradigm of life, that it's like, if I don't have a mission to go accomplish, I'm just not right. And she doesn't have the same drive. And so I get to take that and drive towards a mission that adds value to our family and our life, but also the community and the world. And she's driven by supporting and empowering me to be a person I couldn't be otherwise, which is absolutely who she is for me. And she'd tell you I'm the same thing for her. But then her mission is giving our children support, love, foundation, and care that set them up to go experience the world as greatly as they can. So it's not too much of a struggle for us in that regard. We've got plenty of friends, and like my brother's wife, she's got a business that she started, and that really, really works for her and for them. But for us, we're really comfortable with her owning everything in the home and the kids. And that's like, it fulfills her and fills her. And since homeschool, that's like a whole other, so like we thought so she was going to be looking for careers again or something. I didn't know if she was going to work with me or go volunteer time at a nonprofit, which was kind of her number one option, because she didn't know if she could handle me being her boss, which was probably a fair assessment to be concerned about. But then we stumbled into homeschool. We had talked about it for a few years, and it all came together at the same time. And so she just wrapped up the first quarter with our oldest two girls, and she loves it. And so now she's set for the next, what do we got? 13 more years homeschooling from the oldest to the youngest. So we got she's got a career at home as a teacher for quite a while now.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. You have 3 girls or 2 girls? 3
girls and a boy. So we go girl, and then twins are the last 2.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Dude, that's amazing. Peter, you know what? I'm just thinking, man, if you walked in right now with a white coat and say, hey, I'm your doctor, I would think you're my doctor. You speak so good. You look the part of a doctor. I never would think you're an entrepreneur. The way you speak so good, man. I'm gonna keep listening to you.
Most entrepreneurs can't speak, apparently.
I can't speak. I'm a podcast host.
So Pat made fun of me 2 years ago at the vault. He said, anybody who's a valedictorian, stand up. And I had to stand up. Now, again, I got to qualify this. I was a valedictorian of a town of 2,400 people.
Doesn't matter,
So
Peter. Doesn't matter.
But there was only 3 of us. There's 2,000 people, and there was only 3 of us that stood up. So to your point, I don't know that it's a blessing. It might be more of a curse in the world of entrepreneurship, but I am a thinker.
Let me tell you something. You speak really well. Really well. Peter, where can we find you?
You can find me at the Swenson Brothers on Instagram or YouTube, or PV Swenson on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. And my brother and I we got a podcast we've been playing with, and a brand that we're going to continue to build. And then I've got my personal stuff as well.
Beautiful. Peter, what's the name of the company? Solar company.
Solar company is Genesis Power Solutions.
Love it. And established 3 years ago.
Currently, we serve Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Arizona.
5 states.
5 states.
Wow. Look at you guys. Well, God bless you, Peter. I'm going to either fly to you.
And Nebraska. I can't forget about Nebraska.
Oh.
Sorry. Shout out to my Nebraska people. We're in Nebraska now, too.
6 states. 6
states.
Look at you guys. Amazing. How many employees do you have?
Just under salespeople, a little over 50. Total is right at 70.
In 3 years.
3 years. We've been bigger. We've been bigger. Now we're smaller. I feel like we've been running a startup for 3 years, but we continue to learn more every day, and we're just trying to fail fast and move forward.
Where do you live right now?
Arizona, just outside of Phoenix.
I may come to you there. I'll do an interview face to face. But Peter, I enjoyed this so much. Thank you for jumping on board. You know, you're a man of your word. I talked to him, like you said yes to me. I'm like, man, he's so busy. Like, oh, dude, KB can't do it. But you are a man of your word, man. You did. And your assistant, Raina, she's a pleasure to work with. Shout out to Raina. She put it together for us.
Beautiful. Thank you for the time, KB.
Thank you, Peter. Good luck with everything. God bless you. And the future looks bright.
Future looks bright.
Thank you so much.